Welcome to the channel. I know many of you listen to these videos to relax or fall asleep, and I'm really glad you're here. Before we start today's crime stories, please take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already. And if there's any crime story you'd like me to narrate for you, feel free to request it in the comment section. Now let's begin. Story 1. Peter Manuel was born in New York City in the United States in 1927. His parents, Samuel and Bridget Manuel, were both from Scotland. They had moved to America hoping for a better life. When Peter was still a baby, the family moved again, this time to the city of Detroit. Life was hard for the family during the Great Depression, a time when many people had no jobs and little money. In 1932, when Peter was 5 years old, his parents decided to return to Scotland. They had no more luck in America than they had back home. The family first went to Glasgow, a big city in Scotland. Peter's father found work where he could. Soon after, the family moved south to Coventry, a city in England. This is where Peter grew up. He was a small boy and was often bullied by other children. He did not do well in school. He struggled to read and write properly. He felt angry and picked on by the world. By the age of 10, he had started stealing small things. He stole from shops and from people's homes. The local police in Coventry soon knew his name for these petty thefts. When Peter was 12 years old, his troubles with the law became more serious. He was charged with theft and with indecent assault, which is a type of sexual attack. Because of his age, he was not sent to a normal prison. Instead, he was sent to a borstal. A borstal was a special prison for young men. It was meant to correct their behavior. Peter's behavior did not improve. He did not like being locked up. He tried to escape from the borstal. In fact, he tried to escape 10 different times. He was often caught and brought back. In 1946, when Peter was 19, his family moved back to Scotland for good. They settled in a town called Birkinshaw in the county of Lanarkshire. This area is south of the city of Glasgow. Peter was now a young man with a long history of bad behavior. He did not have a steady job. He spent his time hanging around, getting into more trouble. At the age of 16, back in England, he had committed several serious sexual assaults. For these crimes, he was sent to Peterhead Prison, a tough prison in Scotland. He served 9 years there and was released in 1955. After his release from Peterhead, Peter Manuel went back to live with his parents in Birkinshaw. He was now 28 years old. He did not look for honest work. He continued his life of crime, mostly breaking into houses to steal things. Later in 1955, he was accused of a rape in the town of Airdrie. He went to court for this crime. In a surprising move, he decided to defend himself instead of having a lawyer. He spoke to the jury himself. He was found not guilty and walked free from the court. This made him feel very clever and above the law. After being found not guilty of rape in late 1955, Peter Manuel continued to live with his parents in Birkinshaw. He spent his days idle and his nights often breaking into homes or businesses to steal. On the evening of January 2nd, 1956, he was in the Calderwood area of East Kilbride. He saw a 17-year-old girl named in Nylands walking near a golf course. Manuel began to follow her. He stalked her until she was in a secluded spot. He then attacked her. He raped her and hit her on the head many times with a heavy piece of iron. This killed her. The police later questioned Manuel about this murder because of his known history. He told them he had been at home with his parents that night. His father, Samuel Manuel, told the police the same thing. This alibi, or claim of being elsewhere, was believed at the time. No one was charged with Nyland's murder. On September 17, 1956, Manuel was out on bail. This means he was waiting for a court date for a housebreaking charge and was free to go home. That night, he went to a house in Burnside, Lanarkshire. The house belonged to the Watt family. The mother, Marion Watt, was home with her 16-year-old daughter, Vivian, and Marion's sister, Margaret Brown. Manuel broke into the house. He had a gun with him. He shot and killed all three women in their beds. He then made it look like a burglary by moving some items around. At this time, the police were searching for the killer. They knew Manuel was a criminal who lived nearby. But they also focused on Marion Watt's husband, William. He had been on a fishing trip far away. Some witnesses said they saw him driving back near his home on the night of the murder. Because of this, the police arrested William Watt and put him in prison for 2 months. They eventually let him go because they could not prove he did it. The real killer was still free. On December 8, 1957, Manuel traveled to Newcastle, a city in England. He said he was looking for work. That evening, he called for a taxi. The driver was a man named Sidney Dunn. Manuel got into the taxi. At some point during the journey, he shot Dunn in the head. He then drove the taxi, with Dunn's body inside, to a remote area of moorland in County Durham. He left the body there. He returned to Scotland soon after. The English police did not connect this murder to Manuel at first. 20 days later, on December 28, 1957, Manuel was back in Lanarkshire. A 17-year-old girl named Isabel Cook was going to a dance at her old school in Uddingston. Manuel saw her. He followed her, kidnapped her, and took her to a remote place. He raped her and then strangled her to death. He buried her body in a farmer's field. People reported Isabel missing, but no one knew what had happened to her. Just a few days later, in the early morning of January 1st, 1958, Manuel went to another house in Uddingston. This was the home of the Smart family. Peter Smart, his wife Doris, and their 11-year-old son Michael were asleep after celebrating the New Year. Manuel broke in. He shot all three of them dead in their beds. After the murders, he did not leave. He stayed in the Smart family's house for almost a week. He ate the food they had prepared for their New Year celebration. He fed the family cat. He slept in their beds. He took his time. During this week, the police were outside looking for Isabel Cook. At one point, Manuel even used the Smart family's car. He gave a lift to a police officer who was searching for Isabel. He talked to the officer and suggested the police were looking in the wrong place. Before he finally left the Smart house, Manuel took some money. Peter Smart had taken out brand new banknotes from the bank before the new year. Manuel found these notes and stole them. He left the house and dumped the Smart family car nearby. He then went to several pubs in the East End of Glasgow. He used the stolen brand new banknotes to pay for his drinks. The brand new banknotes that Peter Manuel used in the Glasgow pubs became the first major clue. The police investigating the Smart family murders knew that Peter Smart had withdrawn these specific notes from his bank. When they learned that the same notes were being spent in pubs after the family's death, they focused on who was spending them. Witnesses in the pubs described a man matching Manuel's appearance. This gave the police strong reason to connect him to the crime scene. The police obtained a warrant to arrest Manuel. They went to his parents' house in Birkinshaw on January 14, 1958. He was asleep. When officers, including Detective Andrew Stewart, began to read the warrant to his father, Manuel woke up and became very angry. He shouted that the police had not found anything and could not take him. However, he went with them voluntarily to the police station in Bellshill. That night, he was formally charged with the murders of the Smart family and with a separate housebreaking. While Manuel was in custody, the police arrested his father, Samuel Manuel. They questioned him about the alibi he had given for his son 2 years earlier for the Nylands murder. The pressure on his father made Manuel talk. He decided to confess to many of the killings, though he hoped to make a deal to avoid the death penalty. He confessed to the murders of the Watt family, Isabel Cook, and the Smart family. He also confessed to killing in Nylands. He did not confess to the murder of Sidney Dunn in England. To prove his knowledge, he led police to the field where he had buried Isabel Cook's body. He gave details about the crimes that only the killer would know. Peter Manuel was put on trial at the High Court in Glasgow in May 1958. He was charged with 8 murders. The charge for Nylands was later dropped because the only evidence was his own confession, and the court deemed it insufficient. In a shocking move, Manuel fired his lawyers. He chose to represent himself in court. He questioned witnesses and tried to blame others. He claimed that William had killed his own family. He also claimed that Peter Smart had killed his wife and son before killing himself, and that Smart had given him the keys to the house. The judge, Lord Cameron, said Manuel defended himself with remarkable skill, but his stories were not believable. The evidence against him was very strong. It included the banknotes, his confessions, and the details he knew about the crime scenes. The jury found him guilty of 7 murders. Those of Marion Watt, Vivian Watt, Margaret Brown, Isabel Cook, Peter Smart, Doris Smart, and Michael Smart. The judge put on the black cap and sentenced Peter Manuel to death by hanging. On July 11, 1958, at Barlinnie Prison in Glasgow, the sentence was carried out. The executioner was Harry Allen. Before the execution, Manuel heard a radio playing in a nearby room. His reported last words were, "Turn up the radio, and I'll go quietly." He was then executed. After his death, a coroner's jury in England officially found him responsible for the murder of Sidney Dunn, based on evidence linking him to the taxi. William Watt, who had been wrongly accused, was finally cleared. The families of the victims knew the killer had been caught, but their lives were forever changed by their loss. Peter Manuel was the third-to-last person to be executed in Scotland before the death penalty was abolished. The case led to discussions about improving police cooperation, eventually contributing to the creation of a single national police force for Scotland many years later. The story of Peter Manuel's crimes and his self-led defense remains a dark chapter in Scottish legal history. Story 2. Dennis Andrew Nilsson was born on November 23, 1945, in the small fishing town of Fraserburgh, Scotland. He was the second child in his family. His father was a Norwegian soldier who had come to Scotland during World War II. His mother was a local Scottish woman. The marriage between his parents was not a happy one. His father was often absent and showed little interest in family life. The marriage ended in divorce when Dennis was still a young boy. After the divorce, Dennis, his older brother, and his younger sister lived with their mother and her parents. Dennis formed his strongest childhood bond with his maternal grandfather. His grandfather was a fisherman. Dennis admired him greatly. They spent a lot of time together on long walks along the beach and the harbor. Dennis later described this time as a period of contentment. His grandfather was his protector and hero. He felt secure when his grandfather was around. A major event happened when Dennis was 6 years old. In October 1951, his grandfather died suddenly of a heart attack while at sea. His body was brought back to the family home. Dennis's mother, who was crying, asked if he wanted to see his grandfather one last time. Dennis said yes. He was taken into the room where his grandfather's body lay in an open coffin. His mother told him his grandfather was just sleeping and had gone to a better place. This experience left a very deep and vivid impression on the young boy. After his grandfather's death, Dennis changed. He became more quiet and withdrawn. He spent more time alone, often staring out at the harbor. At home, he pulled away from family affections. He began to feel that his mother, grandmother, and later his stepfather paid more attention to his older brother and younger sister. He felt jealous of his brother's popularity. He was closest to his younger sister during these years. When he was about 9 or 10 years old, Dennis had a frightening accident. He was playing by the sea and was pulled under the water by a strong current. He was almost dragged out to sea and nearly drowned. He was rescued by another boy who dragged him back to shore. This experience of nearly dying stayed with him. Around this time, his mother remarried a man named Andrew Scott. The family moved to the village of Stricken. Dennis initially did not like his strict stepfather, but he eventually learned to respect him. The family was poor, and Dennis felt embarrassed by this. He seldom invited friends to his house. He found life in the small village boring, with few opportunities. As he entered his teenage years, Dennis realized he was attracted to other boys. This confused him and made him feel ashamed. He kept these feelings a secret from everyone. He experimented sexually with his younger sister on one occasion, which confused him further about his sexuality. His older brother began to suspect Dennis was homosexual and would mock him for it in public. Dennis felt isolated and different. Looking for a way out of his small-town life, Dennis joined the Army Cadet Force at age 14. He saw the British Army as his escape route. He did well in school but left in 1961. He worked briefly in a local canning factory. After just a few weeks, he told his mother he had decided to join the Army properly. He wanted to be trained as a chef. He passed the entry exams and enlisted in September 1961. His Army training started in Aldershot, England. Dennis did very well in his duties and later said these were some of the happiest years of his life. He enjoyed the structure and the chance to travel. However, he kept his homosexuality a complete secret from the other soldiers. He was very careful, even avoiding group showers so no one would suspect his attraction to men. His Army career took him to different places, including West Germany, Norway, and Aden, now part of Yemen. During these years, he began to drink alcohol more heavily. He also found that his private sexual fantasies were becoming unusual. He started to fantasize about having a sexual partner who was unconscious or not moving. He was too shy to seek real relationships. When he had privacy in his own room, he would masturbate while looking at himself in a mirror, imagining he was with another man. These fantasies became more fixed over time. He finished his Army service in October 1972, after 11 years. He returned to live with his family in Stricken for a few months. The stay did not go well. An argument about homosexuality with his older brother led to a physical fight. His brother told their mother that Dennis was gay. After this, Dennis decided to cut ties with his family. He wanted to get away. He decided to move to London to join the Metropolitan Police. He moved to London in December 1972 and began police training. Dennis Nilsson completed his police training in London in April 1973. He was posted as a police constable in the Willesden Green area. He enjoyed parts of the work, but missed the closer friendships he had in the Army. He began to drink alone in the evenings. He also started to visit pubs that were known to be popular with gay men. He had several casual sexual encounters with men he met there. These brief relationships left him feeling empty. He wanted a lasting partner, but could not find one. In December 1973, believing his personal life was incompatible with being a police officer, he resigned. After leaving the police, he worked for a few months as a security guard. The work was not steady. In May 1974, he found stable employment as a civil servant. He worked at a job center in Denmark Street. His job was to help unskilled workers find employment. He was seen as a quiet, hard worker. He kept to himself. He volunteered for overtime often, leading colleagues to think he had no social life outside of work. In late 1975, Nilsson met a young man named David Galachon. He helped Galachon during a street argument. The two men talked and decided to live together. Nilsson used some inherited money to rent a ground-floor flat at 195 Melrose Avenue in Cricklewood, North London. For a while, Nilsson was content. He was in a relationship and had a home. However, he and Galachon grew apart. They argued. They slept in separate beds, and began seeing other people. The relationship ended in 1977 when Galachon moved out. After Galachon left, Nilsen lived alone. He had several short-lived relationships with other men, but none lasted. By late 1978, he was very lonely. He spent his evenings drinking spirits and listening to music. He devoted more and more time to his job. On the evening of December 29, 1978, Nilsen had been drinking heavily at his flat. He felt a strong need for company. He went to a local pub called the Cricklewood Arms. There, he met a 14-year-old boy named Stephen Holmes. The boy was trying to buy alcohol, but was too young. Nilsen offered him drinks and company back at his flat. Holmes agreed. At the flat, they both drank more and listened to music. They fell asleep. The next morning, Nilsen woke up and saw Holmes sleeping next to him. He did not want the boy to wake up and leave. He wanted him to stay. He reached for a necktie. He straddled the sleeping boy and tightened the tie around his neck until Holmes lost consciousness. He then filled a bucket with water and drowned him. After the boy was dead, Nilsen washed the body in the bathtub. He placed the body on his bed. He masturbated while looking at the corpse. Later, he put the body under the floorboards of his flat. It remained there for nearly 8 months. In August 1979, Nilsen built a bonfire in the garden behind his flat and burned the body. This first murder established a pattern. Nilsen would meet young men, often in pubs or near railway stations. He would lure them to his flat with offers of alcohol, food, or a place to stay. Once there, he would get them drunk. When they were asleep or passed out, he would strangle them, usually with a tie or a piece of cord. Sometimes he would drown them after strangling them to make sure they were dead. After a murder, he would perform a ritual. He would wash the body, sometimes dress it, and keep it in his flat for days or weeks. He would talk to the corpse, pose it, and masturbate near it. He said he felt a sense of peace and possession. He killed his second victim, a 23-year-old Canadian tourist named Kenneth Ockenden, in December 1979. He strangled Ockenden with the cord from his headphones. He kept the body under the floorboards. For about 2 weeks, he would occasionally take the body out, sit it in a chair, and watch television with it. He took photographs of the posed corpse. Nilsen killed more frequently through 1980 and 1981. He murdered a 16-year-old runaway named Martin Duffy in May 1980. He killed other men whose names he did not know or could not remember. He described them as homeless people, drifters, or men looking for casual sex. He stored multiple bodies under his floorboards at the same time. The bodies began to decompose. His flat smelled bad. Maggots infested the space under the floor. He used insect spray and deodorant to try to hide the smell. When the smell or the number of bodies became too much, he would dissect them. He removed the internal organs. He placed the organs in plastic bags and left them in nearby parks or waste ground for animals to eat. He cut up the remaining bodies. He built bonfires in his garden and burned the body parts. To disguise the smell of burning flesh, he would put an old car tire on top of the fire. In September 1981, he killed his final victim at Melrose Avenue, a 23-year-old man named Malcolm Barlow. Barlow was an epileptic whom Nilsen had helped the day before. Barlow returned to thank him. Nilsen gave him a meal and alcohol, then strangled him. Later in 1981, Nilsen's landlord asked him to move out so the building could be renovated. Nilsen agreed after receiving money to leave. He moved to a new flat at 23 Cranley Gardens in Muswell Hill, North London, in October 1981. This was an attic flat with no garden and no space under the floorboards. For a few months at his new flat, Nilsen did not kill anyone, but the urges returned. In March 1982, he killed a 23-year-old man named John Howlett. A violent struggle took place. Howlett fought back, but Nilsen eventually strangled him and then drowned him in the bathtub. In September 1982, he He killed a 27-year-old Scottish man named Graham Allen. His method of disposal had to change at Cranley Gardens. He could not build bonfires. After killing and performing his ritual with the bodies, he would dissect them in his kitchen. He would flush pieces of flesh and small bones down the toilet. He would boil the heads in a large cooking pot on his stove to remove the flesh and soft tissue. He stored the larger bones and skulls in plastic bags inside a wardrobe and a large tea chest in his flat. In January 1983, Nilsen killed his last victim, a 20-year-old drug addict named Stephen Sinclair. He strangled Sinclair with a ligature. He then bathed the body, powdered it, and laid it on his bed. He slept beside the corpse. Nilsen's system of flushing body parts down the toilet began to cause problems. The drains in the house became blocked. Other tenants complained. On February 8, 1983, a drainage engineer named Michael Catran was called to investigate the blockage. He opened a drain cover and found what looked like pieces of flesh and small bones. He reported this to his supervisor. They agreed to return the next morning to investigate further. On the morning of February 9, 1983, drainage engineer Michael Catran and his supervisor returned to 23 Cranley Gardens. They discovered that the drain, which had been full the previous evening, was now clear. This was suspicious. Catran inspected a pipe leading from the drain to the top floor flat and found small pieces of flesh and what looked like human bones. He and his supervisor immediately called the police. Police officers arrived and collected the remains. They took them to a mortuary for examination. A pathologist confirmed the remains were human. One piece of flesh appeared to be from a human neck and had a mark consistent with strangulation. The police learned from other tenants that the top floor flat was rented by a civil servant named Dennis Nilsen. Detective Chief Inspector Peter J. and two other officers waited outside the house for Nilsen to return from work. When Nilsen arrived, DCI J introduced himself and said they were investigating the blocked drains. Nilsen asked why the police were involved. Jay explained they had found human remains in the drain and asked to come inside to talk. Nilsen let them in. Inside the flat, the officers immediately noticed a strong, unpleasant smell of decay. DCI J told Nilsen the drain blockage was caused by human remains. Nilsen calmly replied, "Good grief, how awful." Jay then said directly, "Don't mess about, where's the rest of the body?" Nilsen remained calm. He said the rest of the body was in 2 plastic bags in his wardrobe. He then said, "It's a long story. It goes back a long time. I'll tell you everything. I want to get it off my chest. Not here, at the police station." He was arrested on suspicion of murder. In the police car on the way to the station, an officer asked Nilsen if the remains were from one person or two. Staring out the window, Nilsen replied, 15 or 16, since 1978. At the police station, Nilsen began to confess in detail. He directed officers to other remains in his flat, a tea chest in the living room and a drawer under the bathtub. The bags in the wardrobe contained the dissected bodies of 3 men, John Howlett, Graham Allen, and Stephen Sinclair. He told police he had killed many more at his previous address on Melrose Avenue. He said he had disposed of those bodies by burning them in the garden. Forensic teams searched both flats. At Cranley Gardens, they found the large cooking pot used to boil heads, knives used for dissection, and the bath used for drowning. At Melrose Avenue, police dug up the garden and found fragments of charred bone in 3 locations, confirming the use of bonfires. The sheer volume of evidence was overwhelming. Nilsen was cooperative with police. He gave long, detailed statements about how he met his victims, how he killed them by strangulation or drowning, and the rituals he performed with their bodies. He said he did not know why he killed, only that he felt compelled to do it when he was drunk and lonely. He expressed no remorse for the victims, only for the trouble he had caused. Identifying the victims was a major task for the police. Some, like the Canadian student Kenneth Ockenden, had been reported missing. Others, like the homeless Stephen Sinclair, were not missed by anyone except perhaps other people on the streets. Dental records and distinctive healed fractures helped identify some victims. At least 4 victims from Melrose Avenue could never be identified. The police believe Nilsen killed 12 young men and boys, though he initially claimed 15. On February 11, 1983, Nilsen was formally charged with the murder of Stephen Sinclair. More charges were added later. He was held in prison until his trial. Dennis Nilsen's trial began at the Old Bailey on October 24, 1983. He was charged with 6 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. He pleaded not guilty. His defense did not deny the killings. Instead, they argued he was guilty of manslaughter, not murder, due to diminished responsibility. This meant they claimed a mental disorder substantially reduced his responsibility for his actions. The prosecution argued Nilsen was sane, knew what he was doing, and had killed with premeditation. They presented evidence of his careful planning, his cleanup methods, and his lies to cover up the crimes, such as telling the drainage engineer the flesh might be Kentucky Fried Chicken. The jury heard terrifying testimony from men who had survived Nilsen's attacks. Carl Stoddard described being strangled and nearly drowned in Nilsen's bathtub, pleading for his life. Another man, Douglas Stewart, told how he woke up to find Nilsen trying to strangle him, but managed to fight him off. Psychiatrists gave conflicting testimony for the defense and prosecution. Defense psychiatrists described Nilsen as having a severe personality disorder that led him to disconnect from reality and treat people as objects in his fantasies. The prosecution's psychiatrist argued Nilsen was manipulative and knew his actions were criminal. On November 4, 1983, the jury returned their verdict. They found Dennis Nilsen guilty of all 6 murders and both attempted murders. The judge, Mr. Justice Croom Johnson, sentenced him to life imprisonment. He recommended that Nilsen serve a minimum of 25 years before being considered for parole. Nilsen was sent to prison. In December 1994, the Home Secretary changed his sentence to a whole life tariff, meaning he would never be released. Nilsen accepted this and did not appeal. In prison, Nilsen spent his time reading, writing, and painting. He wrote thousands of pages of autobiography and notes about his life and crimes. He remained a controversial figure, sometimes giving interviews and fighting legal battles over prison rules, such as his right to receive certain magazines. He had few visitors and corresponded with pen pals. The families of his identified victims were left to cope with their grief and the horrifying details of their loved ones' deaths. For the families of the unidentified victims, there was never any closure. Dennis Nilsen died in custody on May 12, 2018, at the age of 72, from complications following surgery for a ruptured artery. He was cremated in a private ceremony with no family members present. His story remains a stark case study of how extreme loneliness, hidden violence, and a failure to connect with others can spiral into unimaginable horror, ending multiple innocent lives and leaving a permanent scar on criminal history. Story 3. John George Hay was born on July 24, 1909, in the town of Stamford, England. His parents, John Robert Hay and Emily Hay, were both quiet and serious people. They were members of a very strict religious group known as the Plymouth Brethren. The Hays were older when they had their son, and John grew up as an only child in a household where religion was the main focus. The family later moved to a village called Outwood. John's childhood was controlled by the strict rules of his parents' faith. Fun and games with other children were rare. He later said he often had bad dreams as a boy. These dreams sometimes involved religious symbols. However, he showed talent in one area, music. His parents had a piano at home, and John learned to play it very well. He enjoyed classical music and would often go to concerts when he could. He was a clever boy in school. He won a scholarship to attend a good school called Queen Elizabeth Grammar School in Wakefield. He also sang as a choir boy at Wakefield Cathedral. After he finished school, he began an apprenticeship with a company that worked with car engines. He only stayed there for 1 year. He then tried different jobs, including work in insurance and advertising. When John was 21 years old, something important happened. He was working at an advertising agency. His employers began to suspect him of stealing money from a cash box. He was dismissed from this job because of these suspicions. This event was a turning point. After losing the job, John did not try to find honest work. Instead, he began to commit crimes to get money. He started with forgery, which means he falsely made and signed documents. He specialized in forging papers for cars. On July 6, 1934, John Hay married a woman named Beatrice Hamer, who was called Betty. He was 24 years old. The marriage did not last. Very soon after the wedding, John was arrested and sent to prison for fraud related to his forgeries. While he was in prison, Betty had a baby girl. She decided she could not raise the child with John in prison. She gave the baby up for adoption and left John for good. John's own parents were ashamed of his criminal activity. They cut off contact with him and wanted nothing more to do with him. After being released from prison, John Hay moved to London in 1936. In London, he got a job as a chauffeur, which is a personal driver, for a wealthy man named William McSwan. McSwan owned amusement arcades. Hay also helped to maintain the machines in these arcades. But Hay soon returned to crime. He created a complicated fraud. He pretended to be a lawyer named William Cato Adamson. He set up fake office addresses in London and other towns. His fraud involved selling fake shares in companies to people. He told people he was selling these shares cheaply from the estates of clients who had died. This was a lie. He was just taking people's money. This crime was discovered because he made a simple mistake. On his fake office letterhead, he misspelled the town of Guildford as Guilford. Someone noticed this error and became suspicious. The police were called. Hay was arrested, found guilty of fraud, and sentenced to 4 years in prison. He was released from prison just after the Second World War began. He did not change his behavior. He continued to commit frauds. This led to more arrests and more short periods in prison. During one of these prison terms, he read about a famous French criminal. He became very interested in how this criminal used sulfuric acid to get rid of dead bodies. When he was released, he began to experiment. He wanted to see if he could dissolve a body completely. He caught field mice and put them in acid. He found that the small animals dissolved in about 30 minutes. John Hay was freed from prison in 1943. This time, he got a job as an accountant for a company that did engineering work. He was trying to live a normal life. He was now in his mid-30s. He had a long history of being dishonest and committing fraud. He had lost his family and his marriage. He was a man who preferred easy money from crime rather than hard work from a normal job. After his release in 1943, John Hay worked as an accountant. Later that year, by chance, he met his former employer, William McSwan, in a pub in London. McSwan introduced Hay to his parents, Donald and Amy McSwan. William McSwan worked for his parents, collecting rent from their London properties. Hay saw that McSwan had a comfortable life and access to money. Hay wanted this money for himself. Hay began to plan a crime. He remembered his experiments with acid. He decided to kill William McSwan, take his money and possessions, and dissolve the body so no one would find it. He rented a basement room on Gloucester Road in London. He bought a large 40-gallon metal drum and a supply of concentrated sulfuric acid. On September 6, 1944, Hay invited William McSwan to the basement room. He told McSwan he wanted to show him a business idea. When McSwan arrived, Hay hit him on the head with a lead pipe. McSwan died from the blow. Hay then put McSwan's body into the large drum. He poured the concentrated sulfuric acid into the drum, covering the body. He sealed the drum and left it for 2 days. After 2 days, Hay checked the drum. The body had almost completely dissolved into a thick, dark liquid. What remained was a sludge at the bottom. Hay carried the drum to a drain in the floor of the basement and poured the liquid away. He then cleaned the drum. He now owned McSwan's personal things and had access to his home. To explain McSwan's disappearance, Hay told Donald and Amy McSwan that their son had gone to Scotland. Hay said William was hiding there to avoid being called into the army for World War II. The McSwans believed this story. Hay then offered to help them. He started collecting the rents from their properties for them, but he kept most of the money for himself. By the summer of 1945, the war in Europe was over. Donald and Amy McSwan began to ask more questions. They wondered why their son had not returned from Scotland. Hay realized they were becoming suspicious. He decided he had to kill them too, to keep his secret safe and to take their wealth. On July 2nd, 1945, Hay contacted the McSwans. He told them their son was back in London for a surprise visit and wanted to see them at the Gloucester Road basement. When Donald and Amy McSwan arrived, Hay killed them both using the same method. He hit each of them on the head with the lead pipe. He put their bodies into acid drums. After they dissolved, he disposed of the liquid. With all 3 McSwans gone, Hay forged documents to sell their properties. He stole William McSwan's pension checks. In total, he got about £8,000 from these crimes. He used this money to live well, moving into a nice hotel called the Onslow Court Hotel. Hay spent the money on expensive clothes and gambling. By 1947, he had lost most of the stolen money. He needed more. He found a new couple to target, Dr. Archibald Henderson and his wife, Rosalie. Hay met them by pretending to be interested in buying a house they were selling. He visited their home, and while there, he stole Dr. Henderson's own revolver, a .38 caliber Webley pistol. He planned to use it in his next crime. Hay rented a new workshop at 2 Leopold Road in the town of Crawley. He moved his drums and acid from London to this new workshop. On February 12, 1948, he drove Dr. Henderson to the Crawley workshop. He told Henderson he wanted to show him a new invention. Once inside the workshop, Hay took out the stolen revolver and shot Archibald Henderson in the head. He killed him instantly. Hay then put Dr. Henderson's body into an acid drum. Later the same day, he contacted Rosalie Henderson. He told her that her husband had become very ill at the workshop. Concerned, she went to Leopold Road with Hay. When she entered the workshop, Hay shot her with the same revolver. He put her body into another acid drum. After the bodies dissolved, he poured the remains onto a pile of rubbish behind the workshop. To get their money, Hay forged letters that looked like they were from the Hendersons. These fake letters gave him permission to sell all their possessions. He sold everything, including their house. He kept their car and their dog for himself. He made another £8,000 from this crime. In early 1949, Hay was living at the Onslow Court Hotel again and was running out of money once more. He chose a new victim at the hotel, a 69-year-old wealthy widow named Olive Duran Deacon. He overheard her talking about an idea for making artificial fingernails. On February 18, 1949, he offered to take her to his workshop in Crawley. He told her he could help make her fingernail idea a reality. Olive Duran Deacon agreed to go with him. When they arrived at the Leopold Road workshop, he let her walk in first. He then took the revolver and shot her in the back of the neck. She died immediately. He took her coat, her jewelry, and her handbag. He put her body into an acid drum and poured in the sulfuric acid. He left the drum in the workshop. 2 days later, on February 20th, a friend of Olive Duran Deacon, named Constance Lane, became worried because she had not seen her. Ms. Lane reported Olive missing to the police. When Olive Duran Deacon was reported missing on February 20th, 1949, the police began their investigation at the Onslow Court Hotel. They interviewed all the residents, including John Hay. Hay was calm and helpful. He told the police he had driven Mrs. Duran Deacon to Crawley, but claimed she had then left his workshop to meet another person. The police checked his story, but found no evidence of this other meeting. They also checked Hay's name in their records and found his long history of fraud and theft. This made him a person of interest. Because of his criminal record, the police decided to search Hay's workshop at 2 Leopold Road in Crawley. They obtained a key and entered on February 28th. Inside, they found the large acid drum. They also found Hay's personal briefcase. In the briefcase, they discovered a receipt from a dry cleaner for a Persian lamb coat. The police later confirmed this coat belonged to Olive Duran Deacon. The briefcase also contained papers with the names McSwan and Henderson written on them. The workshop had no floor drain. Officers searched the outdoor area behind the workshop. There, on a pile of rubble, they found a sticky, greasy substance. They called a pathologist, Dr. Keith Simpson, to examine it. Dr. Simpson recovered several items from the sludge. About 28 pounds of human body fat, part of a human foot, a set of human gallstones, and a fragment of a denture. The police had Mrs. Duran Deacon's dental records sent to them. Her dentist identified the fragment of denture as part of a set he had made for her. This was the proof that she was dead. With this evidence, the police arrested John Hay for her murder. During questioning at the police station, Hay seemed strangely calm. He asked the detective, Albert Webb, about the chances of someone being released from Broadmoor, a hospital for the criminally insane. He then stated, "Well, if I told you the truth, you would not believe me. It sounds too fantastic to believe." He then confessed to killing Olive Duran Deacon. He also confessed to the murders of the McSwan family and the Hendersons. He claimed he had killed 3 other people, but the police could find no evidence to support this. Hay was charged with murder. His trial began at Lewis Assizes on July 18, 1949. In court, Hay changed his story. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. He claimed he was driven by a compulsive need to drink his victim's blood. He described violent dreams about blood and crucifixes that he said had haunted him since childhood. The prosecution, led by Sir Hartley Shawcross, argued that Hay was perfectly sane. They said his crimes were carefully planned for financial gain, not because of madness. They presented the physical evidence from the workshop and proof of his forgery and theft. The jury did not believe Hay's story about drinking blood. They saw his actions as those of a clever, greedy man who murdered to steal. It took them only 15 minutes to decide he was guilty. The judge, Mr. Justice Humphreys, put on a black cap and sentenced John George Hay to death by hanging. On August 10, 1949, at Wandsworth Prison, executioner Albert Pierrepoint carried out the sentence. Hay was 40 years old. After the trial, the property and money Hay had stolen from his victims were returned to their rightful families where possible. The friends and families of the victims had to live with the knowledge of how they had been killed and dissolved. Hay's own parents, who had cut contact with him years before, were left with the shame of his actions. John George Hay was the last person in Britain to be executed for a crime where the victim's body was never found in a complete state, as the acid had destroyed it. Story 4. Trevor Joseph Hardy was born on June 11, 1945, in Manchester, England. He grew up in a working-class area of the city. His family life was not stable. His parents argued often. When Trevor was a boy, his father left the family home. After his father left, Trevor's mother had to work long hours. She was often not at home. Because his mother was working, Trevor spent a lot of time alone as a child. He also spent some time in the care of local authorities. This means he lived for periods in group homes or with foster families. He did not do well in school. He had trouble paying attention and often got into fights with other children. He left school at the age of 15 with no qualifications. After school, he found it hard to keep a job. He worked in several factories and on building sites. He would often quit or be fired after a short time. He did not like taking orders from bosses. He preferred to be alone. He had few friends. In his free time, he drank alcohol in pubs. He would sometimes get into fights when he drank. As a young man, he began to show a bad temper. He was easily angered. He was known to be cruel to animals. He once threw a neighbor's cat against a wall. He had several girlfriends, but the relationships never lasted long. The women would say he was too controlling and too quick to anger. In his early 20s, he was in serious trouble with the law for the first time. He got into a fight with a man. He hit the man on the head with a heavy tool like a pickaxe. The man was badly hurt. Trevor Hardy was sent to prison for this attack. He spent several years in prison. In prison, he kept to himself. He did not take part in programs to help him get better. When he was released from prison, he went back to live in Manchester. He was now in his late 20s. He found another job in a factory. He also met a woman named Shylock Farrow. They began a relationship and moved into a small flat together. Shylock knew about his past time in prison. To her, he seemed quiet and often sad. He still had a very bad temper, but he did not hit her. She believed she could help him have a better life. This was his life in the year 1974. He was a man with a violent past, a difficult job, and a girlfriend who cared for him. He lived a quiet life on the surface, but he still had deep anger inside him. In December of 1974, Trevor Hardy was drinking heavily. He had become obsessed with a schoolgirl he would see near his home. He thought about her constantly. On New Year's Eve, December 31st, he was drunk and wandering the streets of Newton Heath. He saw 15-year-old Janet Leslie Stewart. In the dark, and because of his drunk mind, he mistakenly thought she was the schoolgirl he liked. He approached her. He started talking to Janet. He then led her to a more deserted area. There, he attacked her. He stabbed her with a knife he was carrying. Janet Stewart died from her wounds. After she was dead, Hardy dug a shallow grave in some nearby waste ground. He buried her body there. He took a ring from her finger. Later, he gave this ring to another young girl as a gift. Janet Leslie Stewart was reported as a missing person. No one knew she had been murdered. Hardy continued his life. He went to work. He lived with Shylock. He did not speak of the crime. For months, no one connected him to the missing girl. Then, on the night of July 19th, 1975, he was out again. He saw 17-year-old Wanda Scala. She was walking home alone from her job as a barmaid in Moston. Hardy followed her. He picked up a brick from the street. He ran up behind Wanda Scala and hit her on the head with the brick very hard. She fell down. He then robbed her. He also sexually assaulted her. To make sure she was dead, he strangled her. He then dragged her body to a nearby building site. He tried to partially bury her under some rubble and dirt. He took her handbag and her blood-stained clothes with him. He kept these items in his flat as sick trophies to remember what he did. The police found Wanda Scala's body. They knew a serial killer might be in the area because of the violence. They began a big search. They stopped and questioned thousands of men. Hardy was arrested for this murder because his own younger brother went to the police. His brother told police that Hardy had bragged about killing a girl. The police questioned Hardy. However, Hardy had planned for this. He had asked his girlfriend, Shylock Farrow, to lie for him. She gave him a false alibi. She told the police he was with her at the time of the murder. Also, while in jail waiting for questioning, Hardy used a metal file. His girlfriend had smuggled the file to him. He used it to file down his front teeth. This was because the killer had bitten Wanda Scala's body. Hardy did not want his teeth to match the bite marks. Because of the false alibi and the changed teeth, the police could not prove he was the killer. They had to release him. 6 months later, in March of 1976, Hardy was out at night. He was trying to break into a shopping center in Failsworth. He was attempting burglary. A 17-year-old girl named Sharon Mosoff was walking home from a staff party. She saw him trying to break in. Hardy saw that she saw him. He could not let her be a witness. He chased her, caught her, and attacked her. He stabbed her. Then he used a pair of tights to strangle her. She died. He put her body into the Rochdale Canal to hide it. The police found Sharon Mosoff's body in the canal. They saw the stab wounds and the strangulation. They now knew for certain a dangerous killer was active in Manchester. The public was very afraid. The police investigation became even bigger, but they did not immediately know who had done it. In August 1976, the police investigation into the murders of Wanda Scala and Sharon Mosoff was under great pressure. The public was scared. The police decided to look again at people they had questioned before. They went back to Trevor Hardy. His previous alibi for Wanda Scala's murder now seemed weak. The police also talked to his younger brother again. His brother repeated that Hardy had bragged about the killing. This time, the police took it more seriously. The police arrested Trevor Hardy for the murders of Wanda Scala and Sharon Mosoff. They searched his flat. During the search, they found Wanda Scala's handbag and her blood-stained clothes. They found these items hidden in his home. These were the trophies he had kept. This was very strong physical evidence linking him directly to the crime. When faced with this evidence, Trevor Hardy confessed. He told the police he had killed Wanda Scala and Sharon Mosoff. He also told them something new. He confessed to killing Janet Leslie Stewart on New Year's Eve 1974. Until that moment, Janet had been a missing person. The police did not know she was dead. Hardy led the police to the shallow grave in Newton Heath, where he had buried her. Now all 3 murders were solved. The police also learned the reason for Sharon Mosoff's murder. Hardy explained that she had seen him attempting to burgle a shopping center. He killed her to silence her, so she could not be a witness against him for the burglary. At his trial in 1977, Trevor Hardy tried to change his plea. He fired his lawyer. He said he was guilty of manslaughter, not murder. Manslaughter means killing without the plan to kill. The court did not accept this. The evidence showed he had planned the attacks and had intended to kill. He was found guilty on 3 charges of murder. On May 2, 1978, at Manchester Crown Court, the judge sentenced him to life in prison. The judge said he must serve a minimum of 30 years. Later, this was changed to a whole life tariff. This meant he would never be released from prison. Trevor Hardy was sent to Wakefield Prison. He worked in the prison laundry and was mostly well-behaved there, but he never showed real remorse. He sometimes wrote letters to the families of his victims. In one letter, he blamed his own parents for what he had done. He never said he was sorry. The families of Janet, Wanda, and Sharon had to live with their loss. They knew the man who killed their daughters was in prison for life. This gave them some justice, but it did not bring their daughters back. Trevor Hardy remained in prison for 35 years. On September 23, 2012, he had a heart attack in his cell at Wakefield Prison. He was taken to a hospital. He died there 2 days later, on September 25, 2012. He was 67 years old. His death ended the life sentence he had been given for the 3 murders he committed in the 1970s. Story 5. Was an only child. His father worked in a textile mill. The family did not have much money, but they lived a simple, quiet life. Donald's childhood was ordinary until a major event happened when he was 10 years old. His mother became very sick with breast cancer. She died from the illness. Her death changed the atmosphere in the home. Donald's father had to work long hours, and Donald was often left alone. He became a more quiet and inward-focused boy after this loss. Donald attended a local school. He did not enjoy his time there. The other children at school found a reason to tease him. They made fun of his last name, Nappy, because it sounded like the word nappy, which is a British word for a diaper. This bullying was a constant part of his school life. He did not have many friends. He did not excel in his studies either. He was an average student who stayed out of notice. The combination of losing his mother and being bullied made his youth a lonely experience. When he was old enough, Donald decided to leave school and join the British Army. He became a soldier in the King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry. The army gave him structure and a sense of purpose. He was posted to different countries, including Kenya, Cyprus, and Aden. His job often involved security duties. During his army service, he learned how to handle weapons and how to move carefully and quietly. He also became very physically fit. The army was the first place where he felt a sense of control and skill. After several years in the army, Donald returned to England. He was a young man in his early 20s. In April 1955, when he was 18, he married a woman named Irene Tate. She was 20 years old. The couple set up a home together in Bradford. They lived a normal working-class life. Donald tried different jobs. He worked as a gardener and a taxi driver. He also did some building work. He was known to be a hard worker, but he did not stay in one job for a very long time. He and his wife kept to themselves and were not very social. In 1960, Donald and Irene had a daughter. They named her Catherine. Donald was a strict father. He set firm rules for his family. For years after his daughter was born, Donald made an important legal decision. He changed his last name from Nappy to Nielsen. He stated that his reason was to protect his daughter. He did not want her to be bullied at school because of her name, as he had been. The name Nielsen was not a family name. Reports say he might have taken it from a business he had bought or from an ice cream van he saw. His wife and daughter also used the new last name. To provide for his family, Donald Nielsen took on more work. He bought a small taxi business. He also rented out rooms in his house to lodgers for extra money. One lodger later said Donald was a private man who liked things done in a very particular, neat way. He was obsessed with planning and details. He would spend hours in his workshop at home, tinkering with tools and locks. He was very interested in mechanics and how things worked. To his neighbors, he seemed like a quiet, somewhat serious family man who was always working on some project around the house. Donald Nielsen's careful planning and interest in locks eventually turned towards crime. He needed more money than his odd jobs provided. He started by committing burglaries at night. He targeted houses in towns across northern England. He was very methodical. He would watch a house for days to learn the routines of the people living there. He wore dark clothing and moved quietly. He used his knowledge of tools to break in without making noise. He stole cash, jewelry, and other small valuables. He committed many burglaries this way, possibly over 400. The police did not connect these crimes to one person for a long time. Nielsen was careful to change his methods often, which confused the police. They sometimes called the burglar the Phantom or Handy Andy. Nielsen's crimes became more serious when he broke into a house in Cheshire. In this house, he found a gun cabinet. He stole a .22 caliber pistol and a shotgun, along with ammunition. Having these weapons changed his plans. He decided that robbing houses was too slow and risky. He started planning to rob post offices instead. Small sub-post offices in villages often had cash on hand at the end of the week. He believed they would be easier targets. His first post office robbery was in 1971. He would case the building, often entering through a rear door or window after dark. He always wore a black balaclava to hide his face and dark overalls. He carried the sawn-off shotgun he had stolen. During an early robbery in Heywood, Lancashire, in February 1972, the postmaster, Leslie Richardson, woke up. A struggle began. Nielsen pointed the shotgun at Richardson and his wife. He escaped, but Richardson was injured. This was the first time Nielsen had used direct violence against a victim. The violence increased because Nielsen was determined not to be caught. During a robbery in Baxenden in 1974, the sub-postmaster, Derek Aston, fought back. Nielsen shot and killed him with a .22 pistol. This was his first murder. The press called the unknown robber the Black Panther because of his speed and all-black clothing. 2 more post office robberies later that year ended in murder. In Harrogate, he killed a sub-postmaster named Donald Skepper. In Langley, he shot and killed the postmistress's husband, Sidney Grayland. In each case, he entered at night, demanded money, and shot the men when they confronted him. Nielsen's most serious crime began with a plan. He read a newspaper story about a family named Whittle. The father had died and left a large amount of money. His 17-year-old daughter, Leslie Whittle, was one of the heirs. Nielsen decided to kidnap her and demand ransom money. He planned this for a long time. He found a drainage shaft in Bathpool Park in Kids Grove. It was a deep, dark hole from an old mine. He prepared the shaft by taking down a wire cable, a sleeping bag, and a torch. On the night of January 14, 1975, he drove to Hyley in Shropshire where the Whittle family lived. He broke into their house very late. He went upstairs to Leslie Whittle's bedroom. He woke her up, put his hand over her mouth, and told her to be quiet. He forced her to get dressed and come with him. He left a ransom note demanding £50,000. He took Leslie to his car and drove her to the drainage shaft. He took her down into the dark, wet shaft. He had made a small platform partway down. He tied a wire around her neck and connected it to the shaft wall. He gave her a sleeping bag, some food, and a few books. He told her he would come back for her when he got the money. He then began to communicate with the family using a series of instructions for dropping the ransom. The instructions were complicated and involved phone boxes and leaving messages. Leslie's brother, Ronald, tried to follow the instructions, but on the night of the ransom drop, he was late to the meeting point because of confusion and police advice. Nielsen, waiting in the shadows, saw no one arrive with the money. He panicked and fled the area without returning to the shaft. Leslie Whittle was left alone, tied up in the cold, dark shaft. The wire was long enough for her to sit or lie on the small platform, but not long enough to reach the bottom. Weeks later, on March 7th, a security guard checking the park saw the open shaft cover and looked inside. He found Leslie's body. She was hanging from the wire. She was very thin. The police and a doctor determined she had been dead for a long time. She had not eaten for days. The shock of the fall had stopped her heart. It is not known if she fell accidentally or if Nielsen had pushed her before he fled. After the failed ransom, Nielsen continued his post-office robberies to get money. He was now Britain's most wanted man. The police were looking for the Black Panther, but they did not know his identity or where he lived. They knew the same gun had been used in the post-office murders and the Whittle kidnapping, so they linked the crimes to one man. Public fear was very high. The police search for the Black Panther ended because of a routine check. On December 11th, 1975, 2 police officers, Tony White and Stuart Mackenzie, were parked in a patrol car on a side road near Mansfield, Nottinghamshire. Early in the morning, they saw a man walking alone, carrying a hold-all bag. They thought this was suspicious and decided to talk to him. The man was Donald Nielsen. When the officers approached him, Nielsen suddenly pulled out a sawn-off shotgun from his bag. He forced the officers into their own patrol car. Nielsen got into the passenger seat and held the gun. He ordered Officer Mackenzie to drive. During the drive, he told Officer White to find some rope in the car. White could not find any. As the car drove through the village of Rainworth, Officer Mackenzie saw a chance. He swerved the car near a chip shop and braked hard. At the same moment, Officer White pushed the shotgun away. The gun fired, and the shot injured White's hand slightly. Both officers struggled with Nielsen. Mackenzie shouted for help from the street. People from the nearby houses heard the noise. Two men, Roy Morris and Keith Wood, ran out to help. They helped the two officers overpower Nielsen and hold him on the ground. More police cars arrived very quickly. The officers arrested Nielsen and took him to the police station. At first, the police only knew they had arrested a man who had attacked officers with a shotgun. They did not know he was the Black Panther. At the police station, detectives began to investigate Nielsen's identity. They searched his home in Bradford. In the house, they found important evidence. They discovered a .22 caliber pistol. Forensic experts test-fired this pistol. The bullets matched the bullets taken from the bodies of the murdered postmasters and from the shooting of a security guard named Gerald Smith. This ballistics test proved Nielsen was the man who had committed those murders. In his workshop, police also found wires and materials like the wire used in the drainage shaft where Leslie Whittle was found. Nielsen was charged with the murders of Derek Aston, Donald Skepper, and Sidney Grayland. He was also charged with the kidnapping and murder of Leslie Whittle. His trial began at Oxford Crown Court in 1976. The prosecution presented all the physical evidence, including the gun, the wires, and witness descriptions from the post office raids. The defense lawyer, Gilbert Gray, argued that Leslie Whittle's death was a tragic accident. He said Nielsen had not meant to kill her and had left her with food and supplies. The prosecution argued that tying a young girl in a dark shaft was a deliberate and cruel act that led to her death. The jury did not believe the accident story. On July 1, 1976, they found Donald Nielsen guilty of the kidnapping and murder of Leslie Whittle. The judge gave him a life sentence for this crime. Later that month, he was also convicted of the 3 post office murders and received more life sentences. In total, he received 5 life sentences. The judge recommended that Nielsen should never be released from prison. This is called a whole life tariff. After Nielsen's arrest, the police also investigated his wife, Irene. They found burned postal orders in the fireplace of their home. These postal orders had been stolen during the post office robberies. Irene Nielsen was charged with handling stolen goods. At her trial, her lawyers said she was afraid of her husband and had been forced to cash the stolen orders. She was found guilty and sentenced to 12 months in prison. She served 8 months before being released. Donald Nielsen remained in prison for the rest of his life. Over the years, he applied to have his sentence reduced, but every government minister and judge refused. They said his crimes were too serious for him ever to be released. In December 2011, Nielsen, who was 75 years old and in poor health, was taken from Norwich Prison to a hospital. He died there on December 18, 2011, from respiratory failure. His death brought a final end to the case that had terrified the country in the 1970s. Story 6. Thomas Watt Hamilton was born in Glasgow, Scotland, in May 1952. His father drove buses, and his mother worked cleaning hotel rooms. When Thomas was less than 2 years old, his father left the family. After this, Thomas had no contact with his father. Thomas's mother found it difficult to care for him alone. Thomas went to live with his mother's parents, his grandparents. His grandparents, James and Catherine Hamilton, decided to raise Thomas as their own son. They legally adopted him and changed his last name to Hamilton. The family moved to the town of Stirling when Thomas was a young boy. For many years, Thomas was told a story about his family. His grandparents told him they were his real parents. They told him that his actual mother, Agnes, was his older sister. Thomas believed this story while he grew up. He did not learn the truth until he was a young man, around 22 years old. Learning this truth affected him deeply. He felt confused and betrayed by the family secret. As a teenager and young man, Thomas Hamilton showed a strong interest in working with boys. He liked to organize activities for young boys. In the early 1970s, when he was 21, he became a scout leader for a local troop. However, this did not last long. Some parents and other leaders made complaints about him. They said he acted in ways that made them uncomfortable. For example, on camping trips, he would have the boys sleep very close to him inside his van. The scout organization investigated these complaints. They decided he should not be a leader. They took away his official scout warrant in 1974. A report from that time said they were suspicious of his moral intentions towards boys. After he could not be a scout, Thomas Hamilton continued to try and run clubs for boys. He used community halls or tried to start his own boys' clubs. He often took photographs of the boys during activities. Sometimes these photographs were of boys with their shirts off during sports or swimming. Some parents did not like him taking these pictures. They complained to him and to local community centers. Thomas Hamilton also tried to run different small businesses. He opened a shop selling picture frames and do-it-yourself goods. He also tried to run a sports shop. These businesses were not successful. They failed and closed down within a few years. Hamilton believed the businesses failed because of rumors about him. He thought people in the town were talking badly about him and his boys' clubs, so they would not shop at his stores. He lived alone. He did not have a wife or a girlfriend. He had few friends. His main social contact was with the young boys in his clubs and their parents. Over the years, more parents became worried about his behavior. They felt he was too intense and controlling with the boys. Some parents stopped letting their sons attend his clubs. Hamilton wrote many letters. He wrote to local officials, to the police, and even to a member of the royal family. In these letters, he complained that he was being persecuted. He said people were spreading lies about him to ruin his reputation and his boys' clubs. He felt the police and the local council were against him. He believed they were stopping him from being a good youth leader. He did not think he had done anything wrong. He thought everyone else was unfair to him. His life became more isolated. His clubs had fewer boys. He spent most of his time alone, thinking about his grievances. He felt the world had treated him very badly for many years. Thomas Hamilton's feelings of anger and persecution grew stronger over time. He owned several handguns legally, as he had a firearms certificate. He was a member of a gun club. In the weeks before March 13, 1996, he began to make specific plans. He took his 4 handguns, 2 Browning pistols, and 2 Smith & Wesson revolvers from their usual storage. He collected a large amount of ammunition, hundreds of bullets. He also obtained many metal magazines, which are containers that hold bullets ready to fire from a pistol. On the morning of March 13th, it was very cold. At about 8:15 a.m., Hamilton was seen outside his home in Sterling. He was scraping ice off the windows of his white van. He then got into the van and began to drive. He drove approximately 5 miles to the nearby small city of Dunblane. His destination was Dunblane Primary School. He arrived at the school around 9:30 a.m. He parked his van in the school's car park. He got out of the van with a bag containing his guns and ammunition. He also carried a knife. First, he walked to a telegraph pole near the car park. Telephone wires for nearby houses ran down this pole. He used his knife to cut these wires. This action was likely done to stop people in the area from being able to call for help. Hamilton then walked across the playground towards the school buildings. He went to a door on the northwest side of the school. This door was near the school gymnasium and some toilets. He entered the school through this door. He was not stopped. He went directly to the entrance of the gymnasium. Inside the gymnasium, a class of 28 5- and 6-year-old children was present. They were primary 1 pupils. Their teacher was Gwen Mayer. A physical education teacher named Eileen Harold and a classroom assistant named Mary Blake were also there. The children were getting ready for their PE lesson. They were in their shorts and t-shirts. Hamilton pushed open the gymnasium door. He was now holding one of his Browning pistols. Before entering the gym, he fired 2 shots into a nearby hallway area, perhaps to scare anyone who might have heard him. Then he walked into the gym. He immediately started shooting. He fired the gun rapidly and did not aim at any specific target. He shot towards the children and the adults. Teacher Gwen Mayer was hit by bullets and died very quickly. Eileen Harold, the PE teacher, was shot in the arms and chest as she tried to shield herself. She managed to stumble into a small storage cupboard at the side of the gym. Mary Blake, the assistant, was shot in the head and legs. She also moved towards the storage cupboard, helping some children get inside. Hamilton walked further into the room. He continued firing. He moved to the east side of the gym and shot more times. He then walked to the center of the gym. Here, a group of children had been hurt by his first shots and were on the floor. He fired multiple shots directly down at them from a very close distance. The noise was very loud. An older pupil from another class was walking outside the gym. He heard the bangs and screams and looked through a window. Hamilton saw him and fired a shot towards the window. The glass broke and the older pupil was cut by the flying pieces. He ran away to get help. Hamilton then went to a fire exit door at the south end of the gym. He opened this door and stepped outside for a moment. He fired several shots across the playground towards another part of the school. A member of staff in a mobile classroom saw him. She immediately told her class of older children to get down on the floor. Hamilton fired several bullets into this classroom. One bullet went through a chair where a child had been sitting just seconds before. Hamilton then stepped back inside the gym. He put the Browning pistol down on the floor. He took out one of his Smith & Wesson revolvers. He put the barrel of the revolver into his own mouth. He pointed it upwards and pulled the trigger. He died instantly from this shot. The entire attack, from when he first entered the gym to when he killed himself, lasted between 3 and 4 minutes. In that time, he had fired 106 shots. 16 children and 1 adult, Gwen Mayer, were killed in the gym. 15 other people, mostly children, were injured by gunshots. 1 child died later on the way to the hospital. Inside the storage cupboard, the injured teachers and a few hidden children waited. They heard the shooting stop. Elsewhere in the school, other teachers and the headmaster heard the loud noises and screams. The headmaster went to investigate and saw the terrible scene in the gym. He ran back to the school office and told his deputy to call for ambulances and police. The first emergency call was made at 9:41 a.m. Staff members began trying to help the wounded children in the gym and in the cupboard. They used towels and clothes to try and stop the bleeding. They tried to comfort the children. The first ambulance arrived at 9:57 a.m. Soon, more ambulances and doctors from a local health center arrived. They began giving emergency care to the injured on the floor of the gym and the hallway. Carefully, they started moving the injured children to ambulances to be taken to the hospital. The police arrived at Dunblane Primary School shortly after the first emergency call. They entered the gymnasium and found the scene of the shooting. They saw the bodies of the children and their teacher. They saw the injured being treated by paramedics. They also saw the body of Thomas Hamilton with a gun nearby. The police immediately secured the entire school building and the surrounding area. They began to help with the evacuation of the other children and staff who were unharmed, moving them to a nearby hotel where parents could collect them. The investigation started that same day. Police identified Hamilton from documents in his van parked outside. They went to his home in Sterling. They searched his house carefully. There, they found more ammunition and gun-related items. They also found many letters and diaries he had written. These writings showed his deep anger and his feelings of being persecuted by the community and authorities. He had written about his failed boys' clubs and his belief that people were spreading rumors about him. The police worked to understand how Hamilton got his guns. They checked his firearms certificate. It was legal. He had obtained it years earlier and had regularly renewed it. He was a member of a gun club, which was a requirement for owning handguns. The police interviewed officials at the gun club. They also interviewed people who had made complaints about Hamilton in the past. It became clear that many people in Sterling and Dunblane had been worried about him for a long time. Some parents had told the police about their concerns years before the shooting. Because the crime was so large and shocking, a public inquiry was ordered. This inquiry was led by a senior judge, Lord Cullen. The Cullen inquiry listened to evidence for many weeks. Police officers explained what they found. Doctors explained the injuries. School staff and survivors explained what they saw and heard. The inquiry also looked into how Hamilton got and kept his gun license. They learned that some police officers had been concerned about him having guns years earlier. These concerns were noted in files, but no action was taken to remove his firearms certificate. The information from the inquiry made the public very upset. Many people in Britain asked why one man could legally own so many handguns and so much ammunition. A campaign, called the Snowdrop Petition, was started by people who wanted to change the gun laws. The campaign was named after the snowdrop flower, which blooms in March when the shooting happened. Millions of people signed petitions asking for a ban on private handgun ownership. The government first passed a new law in 1997. This law banned most types of handguns. After a new government was elected later that same year, a second law was passed. This second law banned almost all remaining private handguns in Great Britain. People who owned handguns had to surrender them to the police. The government paid them compensation for their weapons. This change in the law is the main lasting effect of the Dunblane tragedy. For the families of the victims, there was no criminal trial because Hamilton had killed himself. The legal process for them was the public inquiry. The inquiry's final report, the Cullen Report, made many recommendations to improve school security and to make gun laws stricter. The families worked to support each other. Some set up charitable trusts in memory of their children. One trust was named after teacher Gwen Mayer to help fund projects in primary schools. The school gymnasium where the shooting happened was torn down a month after the tragedy. The space was made into a quiet memorial garden for the school and the families. A larger memorial garden was also built in the local cemetery, where many of the victims are buried. It has a fountain and a plaque with the names of those who died. The official files about the police's past dealings with Thomas Hamilton were sealed from the public for 100 years, to protect the privacy of the children named in complaints. Later, some parts of these files were released. These released papers showed that Hamilton had been reported to legal authorities years before the shooting for his behavior with boys, but no prosecution had happened. The community of Dunblane and the whole of the United Kingdom remembered the events of March 13, 1996, for a long time. Every year, on the anniversary, simple services are held to remember the 16 children and their teacher who lost their lives. The story fully closes with the understanding that this event led to permanent changes in British law and left a lasting mark on a nation. Story 7. Barry Kenneth Williams was born in 1944. He lived his entire life in the English Midlands. For all of his adult years, he lived in the same house at 14 Andrew Road in West Bromwich. He lived there with his elderly parents, Hilda and Horace. His parents owned a small metal polishing business in nearby Birmingham. Barry was their only child, and he never moved out. Barry was a quiet man with a very routine life. He was not married and had no known girlfriend. He did not have many friends. He worked as a foundry worker. This is a job in a factory where metals are melted and poured into shapes. It was a job that required little talking, which suited Barry. He would go to work, come home, and stay with his parents. His world was very small. Outside of work, Barry had one main interest. He was very interested in guns. He owned a legal firearms certificate. This certificate allowed him to own one semi-automatic pistol. He used this pistol for target shooting at approved gun clubs. He would go to these clubs to practice shooting at paper targets. This hobby became the most important part of his life. However, Barry began to act strangely at the gun clubs. At one club in Telford, he started shooting at human-shaped dummies that wore wigs. This made the other club members uncomfortable. He also made modifications to his bullets to make them more powerful than normal. Because of this odd and dangerous behavior, the gun club in Telford asked him to leave. Other members at a different club thought he was stealing bullets. Barry's problems were not only at the gun club. He also had serious problems at home with his neighbors. Next door, at number 16 Andrew Road, lived the Burkett family. Barry became obsessed with the Burkett family. He believed they made too much noise. He complained that the sound of their television and their record player was too loud. He said the noise disturbed him and his elderly parents. This complaint grew into a major fixation for Barry. He would argue with the Burketts about the noise. The arguments happened many times over several years. During one of these arguments, Barry said a very specific thing to the son, Philip Burkett. He told Philip, "I'm going to exterminate you." The Burketts were frightened by this threat. Barry's parents knew he argued with the neighbors, but they later said they had no idea how angry he really was. They described their son as a quiet boy. Barry's world continued to be small. It consisted of his parents, his job at the foundry, his gun clubs, and his growing anger towards his neighbors. His life was a pattern of quiet routine, mixed with moments of strange behavior concerning guns and loud arguments concerning noise. 1 week after threatening to exterminate his neighbor, on the evening of October 26, 1978, Barry Williams was in his house. Next door, George Burkett and his 20-year-old son Philip were working on Philip's car, a Triumph Spitfire, in front of their own house at number 16. The sounds of them working on the car annoyed Barry Williams. This annoyance triggered his planned action. He took his legally owned 9mm Smith & Wesson semi-automatic pistol. He left his house and walked to the driveway next door. He pointed the gun at George Burkett and shot him. George Burkett fell to the ground and died immediately. Barry Williams then turned the gun on Philip Burkett. He shot Philip, wounding him. Philip, who was still alive, ran inside his house to try to get away. Barry Williams followed him into the house. Inside the Burkett home, Barry Williams shot Philip Burkett again. This second shot killed Philip. Iris Burkett, George's wife and Philip's mother, was also in the house. Barry Williams shot and killed Iris. The Burkett's 17-year-old daughter was in the house as well. Barry Williams shot her 5 times. She was hit 4 times in the back and once in the thigh. She survived her injuries but was very badly hurt. 2 other neighbors, a married couple, had seen the attack begin outside. Barry Williams shot at them too. They were both injured but survived. Barry Williams then left the Burkett house. He had fired 23 bullets from his 9mm pistol during this attack. He got into his own car to flee the area. As he drove away from Andrew Road, he took out a second gun, a .22 caliber pistol. He fired 6 shots from this gun out of his car window. In a nearby street called Stanhust Way, 2 young boys, aged 10 and 11, were playing football. He shot at them but missed. He also shot at a woman in the same street, but missed her too. He continued to drive. He drove through an area called Wensbury. As he drove, he shot through the window of a barber's shop. He also shot through the windows of 2 different houses. In one of these houses, a 9-year-old girl was cut by flying glass from the broken window. He needed fuel for his car. He stopped at a petrol station in Walsall. He filled his car with petrol and then drove away without paying the attendant. Barry Williams kept driving for about 20 miles. It was now around 8:10 in the evening. He stopped at another petrol station, the Arbury Road Service Station, in an area called Stockingford, Nuneaton. This station was run by a married couple, Michelle and Lisa Di Maria. Barry Williams shot and killed Lisa Di Maria at the station. He shot her husband, Michelle, who later died in a hospital. The reason for this shooting was not clear, as he had no previous connection to these victims. After this, Barry Williams drove onto the Derbyshire moors. He abandoned his car and slept in some woodland overnight. The next morning, police officers saw him and tried to approach him. He got into his car and drove away very fast. The police began a high-speed car chase. The chase lasted for 30 miles and ended in a place called Spring Gardens in Buxton. Barry Williams's car was involved in a collision during the chase, which stopped him. He got out of his car. He was holding a gun. He tried to hijack one of the police cars that had been chasing him. He wanted the police officers to drive him away. The unarmed police officers who had been chasing him wrestled with him and overpowered him. They took the gun from him before he could fire it. Inside his car, the police found a lot of ammunition. They found 147 bullets for the 9mm gun and 770 bullets for the .22 gun. They also found the .22 caliber pistol, which was fully loaded. They discovered several homemade bombs in the car as well. After Barry Williams was overpowered by police in Buxton, he was taken into custody. He was charged with 5 counts of murder for the deaths of George, Philip, and Iris Burkett, and Michelle and Lisa Di Maria. He was also charged with multiple counts of attempted murder for the other people he had shot and injured. The police investigation was straightforward because he was caught at the scene of the car chase, and all the evidence was in his vehicle. When his case came to trial at Stafford Crown Court in March 1979, Barry Williams did not plead guilty to murder. Instead, his lawyers presented a plea of guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. This legal term means that a person's mental state at the time of the crime reduced their ability to understand their actions or know they were wrong. Several psychiatrists examined Barry Williams and gave evidence in court. They stated that he was suffering from an active paranoid psychosis, a serious mental illness. The prosecution accepted this psychiatric evidence and therefore accepted the manslaughter plea. The judge, Mr. Justice Stephen Brown, ordered that Barry Williams be detained indefinitely under the Mental Health Act. This meant he would not go to a normal prison. Instead, he was sent to a high-security psychiatric hospital. He was first held at Broadmoor Hospital and later moved to Ashworth Hospital. He remained there for treatment for many years. In 1994, after 15 years in the hospital, a mental health tribunal reviewed his case. This is an independent legal panel that decides if a patient is no longer a risk to the public. The tribunal, based on medical reports from his doctors, decided he could be conditionally released. This was not a full freedom. He was released on a strict conditional discharge, which meant he could be sent back to the hospital immediately if he broke any rules or showed signs of being dangerous again. Upon his release, Barry Williams legally changed his name to Harry Street. He moved to Wales, far from West Bromwich. In 1996, he got married and he and his wife later had a child. In 2005, the family moved back to the Birmingham area, living on Hazelville Road in Hall Green. His new neighbors did not know his real identity or his past. The police and health authorities were monitoring him under a system called Multi-Agency Public Protection Arrangements, MAPA. In October 2013, his next-door neighbor in Hall Green reported him to the police for a campaign of harassment. The neighbor said Harry Street was making them fear for their safety. West Midlands police began an investigation. As part of this investigation, they got a warrant to search his home. During the search, police officers found dangerous items. They found an improvised explosive device, or a homemade bomb. They also found 3 firearms, a revolver and 2 pistols. They discovered 50 homemade bullets. The police bomb squad had to be called to make the explosive device safe. Because he was found with these illegal weapons and a bomb, Harry Street was arrested and charged. His real identity was then fully revealed by the police investigation. A local police officer, doing thorough checks, had discovered his link to his old GP records, which showed he was really Barry Williams. In October 2014, at Birmingham Crown Court, he pleaded guilty to the new charges. These were possessing prohibited firearms, putting a neighbor in fear of violence, and making an improvised explosive device. The judge for this trial, Mr. Justice Blair, ordered that Harry Street, formerly Barry Williams, be detained indefinitely once more under the Mental Health Act. The judge said that his recent behavior was very similar to the behavior that led to the 1978 killings, and that a similar tragedy had only just been avoided. Barry Williams was sent back to Ashworth High Security Hospital. Following this case, West Midlands Police announced a serious case review into how his monitoring had been handled. Barry Kenneth Williams, also known as Harry Street, died in a hospital on December 24, 2014, from a suspected heart attack while still detained at Ashworth. Story 8. Derek Bird was born on November 27, 1957, in Cumbria, England. He was a twin. His twin brother was named David. They had an older brother named Brian. Their parents were Joseph and Mary Bird. The family lived in the village of Rora. Derek grew up in this quiet rural area. He went to local schools. He was not a standout student, but he finished his basic education. After school, he learned a trade. He became a joiner, which is a person who makes wooden building parts and does woodwork. For many years, Derek worked as a joiner at the Sellafield nuclear plant. This was a stable job. He worked there until 1990. In 1990, he was accused of taking some wood from the plant without permission. This was considered theft. He was taken to court for this. The court found him guilty. He did not go to prison, but he received a suspended sentence. This means he was warned that if he committed another crime, he would be sent to jail. He lost his job at Sellafield because of this. After losing his job, Derek needed new work. He decided to become a taxi driver. He bought a car and got the necessary licenses. He worked as a self-employed taxi driver in the town of Whitehaven. He drove people around West Cumbria for many years. He was known by other taxi drivers in the area. In his personal life, Derek had a long-term relationship with a woman. They were never married. They had 2 sons together. In the mid-1990s, the relationship ended. Derek and the woman separated. He lived alone in a house in Rora. He remained in contact with his sons. In May 2010, one of his sons had a child. This made Derek a grandfather. Derek had some friends. He was in a diving club where he enjoyed scuba diving. People who knew him said he could be quiet, but also good company. He liked to go on holidays. He traveled to Thailand on more than one occasion. However, Derek also had problems. His father, Joseph Bird, died in 1998. After the death, there was a will. The will stated how the father's money and property should be shared. Derek believed he did not get a fair share from his father's will. He thought his twin brother, David, had received more. The family solicitor who handled the will was a man named Kevin Commons. Derek felt angry about this situation for a long time. Derek also had financial problems. He was self-employed as a taxi driver. The government department that collects taxes, called HM Revenue and Customs, began to look at his finances. They were investigating whether he had paid the correct amount of tax. This investigation was ongoing. It caused Derek worry and stress about money. In 2007, something violent happened to Derek. He was driving his taxi. He picked up 4 men. At the end of the journey, the men did not want to pay. An argument started. The 4 men attacked Derek. They beat him until he was unconscious. He was hurt badly. Friends later said that after this attack, Derek seemed different. He became more withdrawn and less trusting. Derek had licenses for guns. He got a license for a shotgun when he was young, in 1974. He renewed this license every few years. In 2007, he also got a license for a .22 caliber rifle. He used these guns for hunting and sports shooting. This was legal in the countryside where he lived. By the start of June 2010, Derek Bird was a 52-year-old man. He lived alone. He worked as a taxi driver. He was a grandfather. He had ongoing stress about a family dispute and a tax investigation. He had a history of a theft conviction and a serious assault. He owned licensed guns. This was his life. On the morning of Wednesday, June 2nd, 2010, Derek Bird woke up at his home in Rora. He had 2 legally owned guns, a double-barreled shotgun and a .22 caliber rifle with a telescopic sight and a silencer. Before he left his house, he used a saw to shorten the barrels of his shotgun. This made the shotgun easier to hide, but less accurate. He left the saw and the cut-off pieces of barrel at his home. He put the shortened shotgun and the rifle into his car, which was a gray Citroen Xara Picasso. He also had ammunition for both weapons. He then drove away. His first stop was in the village of Lampla. He drove to the home of his twin brother, David Bird. Derek was still angry about his father's will and believed David had cheated him. He took his .22 rifle. He found David and shot him. He shot his brother 11 times with the rifle. David Bird died immediately from these gunshot wounds. Derek then got back into his car and drove to the town of Freisington. In Freisington, Derek went to the home of a man named Kevin Commons. Kevin Commons was the solicitor who had handled his father's will. Derek blamed him for the problems with the inheritance. Kevin Commons was getting into his own car when Derek arrived. Derek used his sawn-off shotgun. He fired twice to stop Commons from driving away. One shot hit Commons in the shoulder. Kevin Commons got out of his car and tried to go into his farmyard. Derek then switched to his .22 rifle. He shot Kevin Commons twice in the head at close range. Kevin Commons died from these wounds. A woman who lived nearby heard the gunshots. She saw Derek Bird. She called the police on her telephone. However, she was unsure what to do. She first went to ask her neighbors for advice. This caused a delay of several minutes before the call was fully made. She also told the police that the gunman had an air rifle, which is less powerful than a real rifle. This incorrect information slowed down the police response at the beginning. After killing the solicitor, Derek Bird drove towards Whitehaven. On the way, he stopped at a friend's house. He had previously lent this friend a shotgun. He wanted it back. He knocked on the door, but only his friend's wife was home. She did not have access to the gun. Derek did not get the extra weapon and left. He arrived in Whitehaven at about 10:30 in the morning. He drove to a taxi rank on Duke Street. He was a taxi driver and knew this place well. He called over another taxi driver named Darren Riekesel. Derek knew Darren. There was bad feeling between them. Derek believed Darren Riekesel had stolen customers from him. There had also been an incident where Darren had damaged the tires on Derek's taxi. Derek pointed his .22 rifle through his car window. When Darren Riekesel came close, Derek shot him twice at point-blank range. The bullets hit Darren in the face and chest. Darren Riekesel fell to the ground and later died from his injuries. Another taxi driver at the rank, named Richard Webster, saw this happen. He shouted at Derek Bird. Derek quickly drove away from the taxi rank. Soon after, he saw another taxi driver he knew, named Donald Reed, who was driving his own taxi. Derek drove alongside him. He fired his rifle through the car window. The bullet hit Donald Reed in the back, seriously wounding him. Derek then drove around the block and came back to the taxi rank where Donald Reed had now stopped. Derek fired 2 more shots at him but missed. Derek then drove a little further into Whitehaven. He saw a taxi driver named Paul Wilson walking on the street. Derek called him over to his car window, just as he had done with Darren Riekesel. When Paul Wilson came close, Derek fired his sawn-off shotgun. The shot hit Paul Wilson in the face, causing severe injuries. Paul Wilson survived but was badly wounded. By now, unarmed police officers from the local police station had been alerted. They began to follow Derek Bird's car. Derek drove onto a road called Coach Road. As he drove, he fired his shotgun out of the window at a passing taxi. He shot the male driver, Terry Kennedy, and a female passenger, Emma Percival. Both were injured. The police officers were still following him. Derek stopped his car. He aimed his shotgun at the 2 police officers. The officers, who had no guns, had to hide behind their car for protection. Derek did not fire at them. Instead, he used this moment to drive away quickly. The officers lost sight of his car. Derek Bird then left Whitehaven. He began to drive through the countryside and smaller towns of West Cumbria. He was now shooting at people seemingly at random. He would often drive up beside people who were walking or working, sometimes calling them over to his car, and then shooting them. Near the town of Egremont, he shot and killed a woman named Susan Hughes. He first shot her with a shotgun, then got out of his car and struggled with her, before shooting her in the head with the rifle. A short distance away, he shot and killed a man named Kenneth Fishburne, who was walking on the road. He then shot another man, Leslie Hunter, in the face and back. Leslie Hunter survived. Derek continued driving. He shot at a teenage girl but missed. He drove to a village called Wilton. There, he shot and killed a married couple, Jennifer and James Jackson, who were on their property. He also shot and injured another woman there, Christine Hunter Hall. He drove on and killed a man named Isaac Dixon, who was working in a field. He then drove to an area near Gosforth and killed a man named Gary Putnam, who was also working in a field. Derek Bird's next area was near the town of Seascale. He shot at cars as he drove. He killed a young man named Jamie Clark in his car. He shot at another motorist, Harry Berger, in a narrow tunnel, injuring him badly. On a road called Drigg Road, he shot and killed a retired man named Michael Pike who was riding a bicycle. Seconds later on the same road, he shot and killed a woman named Jane Robinson. He called her over to his car and shot her at point-blank range. Police were now in a large manhunt for him. Armed police officers were searching the area. Derek Bird drove into the Eskdale Valley. There, he shot and injured a woman named Jackie Lewis who was out walking. He then shot and injured another woman, Fiona Moretta, after she leaned towards his car thinking he needed directions. Derek's final location was the village of Boot. He was driving erratically. He fired shots at people but missed. He then shot and seriously injured a man named Nathan Jones in the face. He also shot and seriously injured a woman named Samantha Christie. He asked her, "Having a nice day," before shooting her. Soon after, Derek Bird crashed his car into a stone wall and other vehicles. His tire was damaged. A family offered to help him, but he told them to go away. He took his .22 rifle from the car. He walked across a small bridge and into a wooded area called Oak Howe Woods. This was the last time anyone saw him alive. Armed police officers found his abandoned car soon after. They began to search the woods. At around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, police found Derek Bird's body in the woods. He had shot himself in the head with his own .22 rifle. He was dead. The shooting spree, which had started in the morning, was over. In total, he had killed 12 people and injured 11 others. After Derek Bird's body was found in the woods near Boot on the afternoon of June 2, 2010, the immediate police manhunt ended. The work of understanding the full scope of the crime began. Police sealed off all the locations where shootings had happened or where evidence might be. There were 30 different crime scenes across West Cumbria that needed investigation. The first task was to formally identify the bodies of the victims and the shooter. Derek Bird's body was taken to a hospital in Barrow-in-Furness for identification. The bodies of the 12 people he killed were also identified. Police teams then began collecting evidence from every scene. This included photographing tire marks, gathering bullet casings, and examining the damage caused by the shots. They interviewed all the people who had been injured and the many witnesses who had seen Derek Bird or his car during that morning. A very important part of the investigation happened at Derek Bird's home in Rora. Police officers searched the house carefully. There, they found the saw he had used to shorten the barrels of his shotgun. They also found the pieces of barrel he had cut off. This proved he had illegally modified the weapon. In the house, they discovered a large amount of ammunition. He had over 750 rounds of .22 rifle bullets and 240 shotgun cartridges. This showed he had access to a lot of bullets. The police also found financial documents in his home. These papers helped explain one of his possible motives. Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, HMRC, the UK tax authority, confirmed that Derek Bird was under investigation for tax evasion. He had not paid the correct amount of tax on his income as a taxi driver. He owed a significant amount of money. The police also looked into his family history. They confirmed there was a long-running dispute about his father's will. Derek believed his twin brother David and the family solicitor, Kevin Commons, had cheated him out of money. Phone records showed Derek had called his brother David 44 times in the 3 days before the shootings, which showed high stress and conflict. Because Derek Bird was dead, there could be no criminal trial. Instead, the legal process was an inquest. An inquest is a court hearing in the UK that investigates sudden, violent, or unnatural deaths. The inquest for the victims of the Cumbria shootings was open to establish the facts of how each person died. The coroner, who is the official who runs an inquest, listened to all the evidence from the police investigation. The evidence was very clear. It showed that Derek Bird had killed 12 people and injured 11 others before killing himself. The coroner's final report recorded that each of the 12 victims was unlawfully killed by Derek Bird. The report also stated that Derek Bird died by suicide. The coroner's report addressed the police response. It noted that the first call to the police about the shooting of Kevin Commons was delayed because the witness asked neighbors for advice. It also noted that the witness mistakenly said the gun was an air rifle. This initial mistake meant police did not understand the extreme danger immediately. However, the report concluded that once the scale of the attack was clear, the police response was appropriate and followed correct procedures. After the inquest, the focus turned to the community and the victims. A memorial fund was set up by the Cumbria Community Foundation to help those affected. People donated money to support the injured survivors and the families of those who were killed. Funerals were held for the victims in churches across West Cumbria. The community came together in public memorial services. A week after the shootings, on June 9th, people across the region observed a minute of silence at midday to remember those who had died. The British government reviewed gun laws after the shootings. Derek Bird had held his gun licenses legally and had passed all the required checks. This led to discussions about whether the laws needed to be tighter, but no major new national laws were passed specifically because of this event. The shootings remained a deep and painful memory for the people of West Cumbria. The story of the Cumbria shootings is a record of a single day of violence that emerged from one man's personal troubles and ended with community loss and a long process of recovery. Story 9. Abdulhamid Aboud was born on April 8, 1987, in Anderlecht. This is a municipality within the city of Brussels, Belgium. He was the son of Omar Aboud, a man who had emigrated from Morocco to Belgium 12 years earlier, in 1975. Omar Aboud first found work in the mining industry. After some time, he became a shopkeeper and ran his own small business. The Aboud family was large. Abdelhamid was one of 6 children. They lived in the Molenbeek area of Brussels. This is a neighborhood known for its immigrant communities. During Abdelhamid's youth, some young Muslim men in Molenbeek were influenced by a strict and radical religious ideology called Salafism. For his education, Abdelhamid attended a selective private school named College Saint-Pierre in Ucla. He was a student there for 1 year, from 1999 to 2000. His time at this school did not last. As a teenager, Abdelhamid developed habits that were problematic. People who knew him when he was young later said he smoked a lot of cannabis during these years. His behavior began to involve petty crime. In December 2010, Abdelhamid Aboud was arrested with another man, Salah Abdeslam. They were caught trying to break into a parking garage. This was not his only brush with the law. He was arrested on other occasions for crimes like assault. He spent time in at least 3 different prisons for these activities. The exact details of these other crimes were not made public by his lawyer. For a period before the year 2013, Abdelhamid Aboud worked with his father. He was involved in the trading business that his father ran. This was a phase of his life where he held a regular job within his family's commercial activities. In early 2014, when he was 26 years old, Abdelhamid Aboud did something that would change the course of his life. He recruited his younger brother, Younes, who was only 13 years old at the time. Abdelhamid convinced Younes to leave Belgium and travel with him to Syria. The 2 brothers departed from Belgium on January 19, 2014. After leaving for Syria in January 2014, Abdelhamid Aboud joined a fighting group within the Islamic State, known as Al-Badr Battalion. This group was active in the war in Syria. During his time there, Aboud recorded videos. In one video, he was seen loading dead bodies onto a truck. He spoke to the camera, saying that before he used to tow vacation vehicles, but now he was towing dead apostates, which is a term he used for non-believers. He wrote in a diary that seeing the blood of infidels was nice to see from time to time. Aboud returned to Belgium by the end of 2013, after his first trip to Syria. In January 2014, analysis of phone records showed he was in contact with another man, Mehdi Nemouch. Several months later, in May 2014, Nemouch shot and killed 4 people at the Jewish Museum in Brussels. Belgian police began to suspect Aboud was organizing a terrorist cell in the city of Verviers. The police raided an apartment for this cell on January 15, 2015. During the raid, 2 members of the cell were killed. Aboud was not there. He later bragged in an interview that he had been in Belgium to lead that cell, but had escaped back to Syria. He said that during his escape, a police officer had even stopped him and compared him to a photo, but did not recognize him. For his role in planning this Verviers cell, a Belgian court convicted him in absentia in July 2015. They sentenced him to 20 years in prison. Aboud gave an interview to an Islamic State magazine in early 2015. In it, he stated his clear intention to carry out attacks in Western countries, which he called Crusader nations. French authorities later discovered he was connected to several planned attacks in France that were stopped by police in the spring and summer of 2015. This included a failed plan to attack a church in Villejuif and a thwarted attack on a high-speed train traveling from Amsterdam to Paris. In November 2015, Aboud was the mastermind behind a major series of attacks in Paris. He helped plan and coordinate the attacks from within the city. On the evening of November 13, 2015, Several teams of attackers struck at different locations in Paris almost at the same time. One team set off bombs outside a soccer stadium. Other teams drove to popular cafes and restaurants in Paris and used automatic rifles to shoot people sitting outside. Aboud himself was part of one of these shooting teams. A third team attacked a concert hall called the Bataclan, where they shot many people and held others hostage. During this attack at the Bataclan, Aboud used his phone to give instructions and directions to the attackers inside the building. In total, 130 people were killed in these coordinated attacks, and hundreds more were injured. After the attacks, the police identified Aboud as the likely organizer. They started a large manhunt to find him. They discovered he was hiding in an apartment in the Paris suburb of Saint-Denis. The police located him by following a woman named Hasna Balassan, who was an associate of his. They saw him enter an apartment building on Rue Corbelin with her. In the early morning of November 18, 2015, French police and soldiers launched a raid on that apartment. A very long and violent gunfight took place. The police used heavy weapons and explosives. During this raid, 3 people inside the apartment were killed. One of them was Abdelhamid Aboud. His body was found in the apartment, heavily damaged by bullets and grenade blasts. The police raid on the apartment in Saint-Denis ended the immediate threat from Abdelhamid Aboud. After the gunfight stopped, police officers entered the damaged apartment. They found 3 bodies. One of the bodies was badly injured from many bullets and from the explosion of a police grenade. To identify this body as Abdelhamid Aboud, forensic experts took fingerprints from the remains. They matched these fingerprints to records held by Belgian police from Aboud's previous arrests. They also used DNA testing from skin samples to confirm his identity. His fingerprints were also found on an AK-47 rifle that was discovered in a car abandoned by the attackers after the Paris shootings. The investigation into Aboud's activities continued after his death. Police searched his belongings and analyzed his mobile phone. On his phone, they found nearly 50 videos and photos. Some of these photos were of the Bullring Shopping Center in Birmingham, England, and other city locations. This discovery showed that Aboud had traveled to the United Kingdom in August 2015. He had entered the country by ferry at the port of Dover, even though there was an international arrest warrant for him at that time. French prosecutors stated that evidence indicated Aboud was planning another terrorist attack on the busy business district of La Défense in Paris. Authorities in Europe worked to understand Aboud's network. They learned he had been a close link between the leadership of the Islamic State in Syria and terrorists operating in Europe. He was connected to other jihadists, including a man named Sharaf al-Muadin in Syria, who communicated with the Paris attackers. The investigation into his many contacts led to arrests in multiple countries. The other people involved in the Paris attacks and Aboud's plans faced justice. His associate, the woman Hasna Balassan, who led police to the Saint-Denis apartment, was killed in the same raid. Salah Abdeslam, the man arrested with Aboud in 2010 for the garage break-in, was a key logistician for the November attacks. He was captured by police in Brussels in March 2016 after a massive manhunt. In June 2022, after a long trial, he was found guilty of murder and terrorism charges and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Many other individuals who helped the attackers were tried and received long prison sentences. The trial provided detailed evidence of Aboud's central role in organizing the violence. The police work that stopped his earlier planned attacks, like the one on the Valais train, was also reviewed. Aboud's younger brother, Younes, whom he had taken to Syria, was confirmed to have died in the conflict zone there. The story of Abdelhamid Aboud ends with his death during a police raid, followed by the prosecution and imprisonment of those who helped him carry out his plans.